Hi, I'm Bob. Welcome back to the tutorial series on solving the exercises for the textbook Microeconomics, Theory and Applications with Calculus, the 5th edition by Professor Jeffrey Poloff. This is the final tutorial for the book. Thank you very much for watching all the videos in this course over the past few months. In today's course, we will discuss the last chapter, which covers contracts and moral hazards. If you have reached this chapter, it proves that you have already mastered most of the content of the textbook. Congratulations on your progress. If you found the tutorial helpful, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, watching my other videos, or even becoming a member of the channel. Thank you. Let's get started. The first section is about the principal-agent problem. Here's exercise 1.1. A California state agency sells earthquake insurance. Because the agency has few staff members, it pays private insurance carriers to handle claims for earthquake damage. These insurance firms receive 9% of each approved claim. Is this compensation scheme likely to lead to opportunistic behavior by insurance companies? Explain. What would be a better way to handle the compensation? If the private insurance firms receive 9% of each approved claim, it leads to the firm's opportunistic behavior. They tend to overhandle the claims because the firms bear little cost but earn part of the revenue from the cases. It is an example of moral hazard. The private insurance firms report more claims than the optimal level. They harm the state agency's interest through their hidden actions. Better ways to alleviate the moral hazard problem include two incentive-compatible contracts. The state agency collects a fixed fee from the insurance firms or signs a profit-sharing contract with the firms. The former shifts all costs and risks to the insurance firms, so the firms consider marginal revenue and marginal cost to find an optimal solution. The latter also leads to an optimal number of claims when information is symmetric. Let's solve exercise 1.2. Some sellers offer to buy back a good later at some pre-specified price. Why would a firm make such a commitment? Sellers show a signal of the product's high quality by doing so. Sellers inform potential consumers that the product is durable and will not depreciate in value quickly. Solving an asymmetric information problem can encourage the demand for the good. Let's answer exercise 1.3. A flyer from one of the world's largest brokers says, most personal investment managers base their fees on a percentage of assets managed. We believe this is in your best interest because your manager is paid for investment management, not solely on the basis of trading commissions charged to your account. You can be sure your manager's investment decisions are guided by one primary goal: increasing your assets. Is this policy in a customer's best interest? Why or why not? No, the policy may not be in a customer's best interest. Managers may shirk their duties of increasing clients' assets. If the fees are based on assets managed, they will spend much time fighting customers with huge initial assets instead of helping clients with small assets to grow. With huge initial assets, the managers do not need to do anything and earn a lot. Let's solve exercise 1.4. A study by Jean Michel found that urologists in group practices that profit from tests for prostate cancer order more of them than doctors who send samples to independent laboratories. Doctors' groups that perform their own lab work bill Medicare for analyzing 72% more prostate tissue samples per biopsy and detect fewer cases of cancer than doctors who use outside labs. Explain these results. Do these results necessarily demonstrate moral hazard? Or can you provide another possible explanation? It is an example of a moral hazard. Moral hazard occurs when an informed party takes advantage of a less informed party through a hidden action. The doctors who perform their lab work have an incentive to test more samples than the optimal level because they profit from doing so. If it is not a moral hazard, cases of cancer should rise as more tests are done. But this is not the case. Let's address exercise 1.5. In 2012, a California environmental group found that 14 plum and ginger candies imported from Asia contain 4 to 96 times the level of lead allowed under California law. Some observers predicted that U.S. consumers would face significant price increases if U.S. law were changed to require third-party testing by manufacturers and sellers. Suppose instead that candies would be reliably labeled tested or untested, and untested candy sold at a discount. Would consumers buy cheaper untested goods, or would they fear a moral hazard problem? Discuss. Asymmetric information leads to opportunistic behavior. Sellers have information about whether the candies contain a high level of lead. They can take advantage of uninformed consumers by falsely labeling them tested and selling the untested candies at a high price. It is an example of a moral hazard. Assuming consumers believe that some sellers have a moral hazard problem, they will not buy expensive tested candies because they cannot distinguish between real and fake tested candies. Consumers only purchase cheaper untested candies. As a result, expensive, real tested candies will be driven out of the market. Only cheaper candies with a high level of lead are available in the market. It is also an example of adverse selection. Let's solve exercise 1.6. A publication of a major clinical trial showed that a common knee operation does not improve outcomes for patients with osteoarthritis. Researchers examined all these operations in Florida from 1998 to 2010. They discovered that after the publication of this article, The number of these operations fell, but the number fell by less in physician-owned surgery centers than in hospitals. Explain why. The reason for the decrease in operations is that patients are aware of the information about the effect of the operation. Those patients with osteoarthritis will not have the common knee operation. Hospital doctors will be more likely to inform patients about that than physician-owned surgery centers. The latter has an incentive not to disclose that information because they benefit from more operations. As a result, more hospital patients choose not to have the operation than patients going to the surgery centers. Let's answer exercise 1.7. The U.S. government provides home insurance for floods. The government will pay no matter how many times floods destroy a home. Does this policy create a moral hazard problem? Explain. Yes, it could create a moral hazard problem because homeowners neglect their responsibility to take reasonable precautions, increasing the chance of damage. The government does not know whether the homeowners have properly prepared for the flood. Homeowners can take advantage of it. The number of homes destroyed by floods is more than the socially optimal level. Let's go to exercise 2.1. When I was in graduate school, I shared an apartment with a fellow who was madly in love with a woman who lived in another city. They agreed to split the costs of their long-distance phone calls equally, regardless of who placed the calls. What was the implication of this fee-sharing arrangement for their total phone bill? Why? Suppose both parties gain equal satisfaction from the phone calls. Because the marginal benefit from the phone calls and the marginal cost of the calls are equally split, their time spent on the calls will be optimal at the point where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. However, if one party earns more satisfaction than the other, the time on the calls will not be optimal. The person who enjoys more talking on the phone only pays half of the fee, and therefore he tends to speak longer, although the other person, who does not get much pleasure but has to pay half, wants to hang up the phone. The time spent on phone calls depends on who dominates. The total phone bill could be very high or very low. For example, if one person refuses to answer the phone, the bill could be zero. Let's address exercise 2.2. Zhihua and Pu are partners in a store in which they do all the work. They split the store's business profit equally. Does their business profit-sharing contract give them an incentive to maximize their joint economic profit if neither can force the other to work? Yes, the profit-sharing contract gives them an incentive to maximize their joint economic profit. The optimal level of time and effort is determined by the intersection of the marginal revenue and the marginal cost. It is the point where the marginal profit is zero. The profit-sharing contract gives them half the marginal revenue and requires half the marginal cost. The intersection point is unchanged. They maximize their joint profit by maximizing their own profit. Let's address exercise 2.3. In solved problem 19.2, does joint profit increase, decrease, or remain the same as the share of revenue going to Arthur increases? In the revenue sharing contract, the agent bears all production costs, but enjoys part of the revenue. The agent has an incentive to provide less time or effort than the optimal level. The joint profit will be lower than the optimal amount. As more revenue goes to the agent, his effort approaches the optimal level, and the joint profit approaches the maximized amount. We can use the example in solved problem 19.2 to show the result in 3 steps. In the first step, we find the optimal level of production and profit. We write the profit function. The first order condition for a maximum profit leads to the optimal units of production, 12, and the maximized profit, 72. In the second step, we find the joint profit using a revenue sharing contract between the principal and the agent, as described in the textbook. Suppose Arthur receives 3/4 of the revenue and Paula gets the rest. The agent, Arthur, maximizes his profit at a quantity of 8. And the joint profit at this production level is 64. Both quantity and joint profit are lower than the optimal levels. In the third step, we figure out how the joint profit changes as more revenue goes to the agent. Say, Arthur receives 7/8 of the revenue and Paula gets 1/8. The agent maximizes his profit by producing 10 2/7 units. The joint profit is about 70.53. Both the quantity and the joint profit increase as the agent's share of revenue increases. We can also prove it mathematically for a general case. For a linear demand, P equals A minus B times Q, and a constant marginal cost M. The optimal quantity Q star that maximizes joint profit satisfies the first order condition. We can derive the optimal quantity Q star and the maximized profit pi star. They are functions of A, B, and M. Next, we consider a revenue sharing contract between the principal and the agent. Suppose a share of revenue theta goes to the agent. The agent's profit is as follows. The agent receives part of the revenue but bears all costs. His profit is maximized at QA, which is smaller than Q star. A revenue sharing contract leads to an output lower than the optimal level. The joint profit pi can be proved lower than the optimal level pi star. Finally, we use the partial derivative of pi with respect to theta to find how the joint profit changes with the share of revenue going to the agent. The joint profit increases with theta. As more revenue goes to the agent, the joint profit rises. Another way to see the relation between the joint profit and the agent's revenue share is to draw a graph. The marginal cost curve is a horizontal line. The agent's marginal revenue equals theta times the original marginal revenue. So the agent's marginal revenue curve lies below the original one. As theta increases, the agent's marginal revenue curve rotates towards the original marginal revenue curve. The intersection EA approaches E star. The quantity QA approaches Q star as theta increases. The joint profit is the blue area. It approaches the big triangle as QA goes to Q star. In other words, the joint profit increases as theta increases. Let's solve exercise 2.4. In the duck carving example with full information, is a contract efficient if it requires Paula to give Arthur a fixed fee salary of $168 and leaves all the decisions to Arthur? If so, why? If not, what additional steps, if any, can Paula take to ensure that Arthur sells the optimal number of carvings? The contract is not incentive compatible. The agent, Arthur, has no incentive to sell any product. His marginal cost is $12, but his marginal revenue is 0. His optimal quantity is 0. If the principal, Paula, can force the agent, Arthur, to sell 12 units of products, the agent earns a profit equal to 24. The principal earns 48. Let's answer exercise 2.5. A promoter arranges for various restaurants to set up booths to sell Cajun Creole food at a fair. Appropriate music and other entertainment are provided. Customers can buy food using only Cajun cash, which is scrip that has the same denominations as actual cash and is sold by the fair promoter. Why aren't the food booths allowed to sell food directly for cash? Asymmetric information about how much food is sold leads to opportunistic behavior. If cash is allowed to be used at the booths, they are likely to underreport sales because it is difficult for the promoter to supervise it. This is an example of moral hazard. Using Cajun cash can eliminate the moral hazard problem because the promoter knows the number of sales. Let's address exercise 2.6. In the duck carving example with limited information, is a fixed fee contract efficient? If so, why? If not, what additional steps, if any, can Paula take to ensure efficiency? Yes, the fixed fee rental contract is incentive compatible under both full information and asymmetric information. The agent bears full costs and enjoys full revenue. He has an incentive to produce the profit-maximizing quantity. The production is efficient. The fixed fee the agent pays the principal will not change the agent's marginal revenue and marginal cost, and therefore will not change his profit-maximizing decision. Let's find answers to exercise 2.7. The author of a science fiction novel is paid a royalty of B's share of the revenue from sales, where the revenue is R equals P times Q. P is the competitive market price for novels, and Q is the number of copies of this book sold. The publisher's cost of printing and distributing the book is CQ. Determine the equilibrium and compare it to the outcome that maximizes the sum of the payment to the author plus the firm's profit. Answer using both math and a graph. The publisher bears the full cost of selling the books, CQ, but it earns part of the full revenue, 1 minus B times R. So it will sell the books fewer than the optimal number. The joint profit is also lower than the optimal level. We have already proven the result in the previous exercise. A revenue sharing contract leads to an output and a joint profit lower than optimal levels. In that exercise, the market price is allowed to change with quantity. Here, the market price is competitive, so it is a constant, not a function of quantity. We can show the results mathematically in 2 steps. In the first step, we find the optimal outcome that maximizes the sum of the payment to the author plus the firm's profit. That is, it maximizes the joint profit. the joint profit pi equals R minus C. The first order condition for maximum profit results in equation 1, P equals MCQ. In the second step, we find the agent's choice. The author is the principal and the publisher is the agent. The agent's profit pi A is as follows. It maximizes its profit, and it leads to equation 2. In the graph, the optimal equilibrium is E star, where the competitive market price line intersects the marginal cost curve. The quantity of books sold is Q star. Under a revenue sharing contract, the equilibrium is EA, where the agent's marginal revenue curve, 1 minus B times P, intersects the marginal cost curve. The agent sells QA copies of the book, which is lower than the optimal level. The maximized profit is the blue triangle area. The joint profit under the revenue sharing contract is the red area. It can be divided into two parts. The agent gets the red triangle area, and the principal's profit is the red rectangle area. The joint profit is smaller than the optimal level. Let's solve exercise 2.8. John manages Rachel's used CD music store to provide John with the incentive to sell CDs. Rachel offers him 50% of the store's profit. John has the opportunity to misrepresent sales by fraudulently recording sales that actually did not take place. Let T represents his fraudulent profit. John's expected earnings from reporting the fraudulent profit is 0.5 T. Rachel tries to detect such fraud and either detects all or none of it. The probability that Rachel detects the entire fraud is T divided by 1 plus T, and the probability that Rachel does not detect the fraud is 1 minus T divided by 1 plus T. Hence, Rachel's probability of detecting fraud is 0 if John reports no fraudulent profit. Increases with the amount of fraudulent profit he reports, and approaches 1 as the amount of fraud approaches infinity. If Rachel detects the fraud, then X greater than 0.5 is the fine that John pays Rachel per dollar of fraud. John's expected fine of reporting fraudulent profit T is T squared times X divided by 1 plus T. In choosing the level of fraud, John's objective is to maximize his expected earnings from the fraud less his expected fine. As a function of X, what is John's optimal fraudulent profit? Show that partial T over partial X is less than 0. Also show that as X approaches infinity, John's optimal reported fraudulent profit goes to 0. With asymmetric information, the agent has an incentive to misrepresent sales to maximize his expected profit. His expected profit equals the expected earnings from the fraudulent profit minus the expected fine. The first order condition for maximum leads to the solution. The quadratic equation has two possible solutions, and only the positive one is the solution for the agent's optimal fraudulent profit. we can prove that the first derivative of the fraudulent profit t with respect to the phi x is negative, using the quotient rule. Finally, as the phi x goes to infinity, the agent's optimal fraudulent profit t approaches 0. Let's address exercise 2.9. In the National Basketball Association, NBA, the owners share revenue but not costs. Suppose that one team, the LA Clippers, sells only general admission seats to a home game with the visiting Philadelphia Sixers. The inverse demand for the Clippers-Sixers tickets is P equals 100 minus 0.004 times Q. The Clippers' cost function of selling Q tickets and running the franchise is CQ equals 10 times Q. For part A, find the Clippers' profit maximizing number of tickets sold and the price if the Clippers must give 50% of their revenue to the Sixers. At the maximum, what are the Clippers' profit and the Sixers' share of the revenues? The Clippers earn half revenue but bear all costs. Its profit is as follows. The first order condition for maximum profit leads to the quantity of tickets sold, 10,000. The ticket's price can be found using the inverse demand function. It is 60. Clippers' profit is 200,000. Sixers' share of revenue is 300,000. For part B, instead, suppose that the Sixers set the Clippers' ticket price based on the same revenue sharing rule. What price will the Sixers set? How many tickets are sold? And what revenue payment will the Sixers receive? Explain why your answers to parts A and B differ. Sixers bear no cost, and the team's profit is as follows. The first order condition leads to the quantity of tickets sold, 12,500. Sixers set a price at 50. Its share of revenue is 312,500. The Clippers' profit is 187,500. Sixers earn half the marginal revenue but bear no marginal cost, so it sells more tickets than in part A, where the Clippers earn half the marginal revenue and bear all marginal cost. For part C, now suppose that the Clippers must share their profit rather than their revenue. The Clippers keep 45% of their profit and share 55% with the Sixers. The Clippers set the price. Find the Clippers' profit maximizing price and determine how many tickets the team sells and its share of the profit. The Clippers' profit is as follows. The first order condition leads to the quantity of tickets sold, 11,250. The inverse demand function gives the tickets price of 55. We then calculate both teams' profits. For Part D, compare your answers to Parts A and C using marginal revenue and marginal cost in your explanation. In Part A, the decision maker bears full marginal cost but earns half marginal revenue, leading to fewer tickets sold than the optimal level. In Part B, the decision maker bears no marginal cost but earns half the marginal revenue, leading to more tickets sold than the optimal level. In Part C, the decision maker bears part of the marginal cost and earns the same proportion of marginal revenue, leading to the optimal number of tickets sold that maximizes the joint profit. Let's solve exercise 2.10. The book retailer believes that it will sell with 1/2 probability each, either 0 or 1 copy of Macroeconomics. The bookstore also believes that it will sell with 1/2 probability Microeconomics. The retail price of each book is $100. The Microeconomics publisher charges a $52 wholesale price and offers a full refund for returned unsold books, while the Macroeconomics publisher charges a low $42 wholesale price. It pays a retailer only $32 if it returns an unsold book. The book retailer has space to shelve only one. Which title does he return? Comment on how the retailer's decision about which title to return depends on the book's wholesale prices and on the compensation from the publishers for returned unsold books. The book retailer's expected profit from keeping microeconomics and returning macroeconomics is as follows. The first part is the expected profit from keeping microeconomics, which is the average of the two possible outcomes. The retailer's revenue from selling microeconomics is 100. The cost is 52 if the book is sold. His profit is 0 in the other outcome. The second part is the loss from returning macroeconomics. The total expected profit is 14. Next, the total expected profit from keeping macroeconomics and returning microeconomics also contains two parts. The first part is the average of the profits in the two outcomes for keeping macroeconomics. If the book is sold, the retailer earns 29, but if the book fails to be sold, the retailer loses 5. The expected profit is 24 from keeping macroeconomics. The second part is the loss from returning microeconomics, which is 0. The total expected profit is 25. The book retailer has a higher expected profit returning microeconomics. A lower wholesale price increases the probability of keeping the book, holding other factors constant. For an extreme case where the wholesale price of microeconomics is 0, the retailer will keep microeconomics and return macroeconomics. On the other hand, a lower compensation leads to a higher probability of keeping the book, holding other factors fixed. For an extreme case where the compensation is 0 for the returned unsold book, the book retailer will not return it. Let's go to exercise 2.11. A monopoly's inverse demand function is P equals 50 minus 2 times Q, and its constant marginal cost is 10. The owner has delegated the decision of how much output to produce to the plant manager. The manager's income, Y, is 10% of revenue. Y equals 0.1 times R. So that a manager who wishes to maximize income Y will choose an output that exceeds the profit maximizing level. Is there a conflict of interest between the owner and manager? Is this situation an agency problem? Under the revenue sharing contract, the manager earns part of the marginal revenue but bears no marginal cost. Her income is maximized at an output of 12.5. However, the joint profit maximizing level of output is 10, which is lower than the manager's choice. The graph shows the result. The joint profit maximizing output is Q star, which is determined by the intersection of the marginal cost and the marginal revenue curves of the monopoly. The manager's marginal cost is 0, and her optimal output, Q1, is determined by the intersection of the marginal revenue curve and the horizontal axis. The agent's choice is not in the principal's best interest. It is an example of the principal-agent problem or agency problem. We can verify that the optimal output level gives an revenue of 300. The agent gets 30. The principal receives 270, leading to a profit of 170. The agent's choice gives a revenue of 312.5. The agent gets 31.25. The principal receives 218.25, leading to a profit of 156.25. The agent's output choice maximizes her income, but harms the principal. Let's answer exercise 2.12. Now suppose that the owner in the previous question changes the manager's compensation to a fixed share, 15% of profit. The situation is otherwise the same as in exercise 3.11. Are the interests of the owner and manager aligned or in conflict? Is there an agency problem in this case? The interests of the owner and manager are aligned under the profit-sharing contract between the principal and the agent. The agent's income is a proportion of the profit. She maximizes her income by choosing an output level that satisfies the first-order condition. The first-order condition is equivalent to the principal's first-order condition for maximum profit. So, the agent's choice will maximize the joint profit. There is no agent problem in this case. Let's solve exercise 2.13. In 2012, the chief executive would receive a salary of $1 and about $16.1 million in stock options, which are valuable if the stock does well. How would you feel about this compensation package if you were a shareholder? What are the implications for moral hazard, efficiency, and risk sharing? Stock price reflects the firm's profitability. It is a profit-sharing contract. It alleviates the moral hazard problem and has efficiency in production because the agent has an incentive to work hard. The principal and the agent share the risk of production. Let's jump to exercise 3.1. Traditionally, doctors were paid on a fee-for-service basis. Now doctors pay on a capitated basis. They are paid for treating a patient for a year, regardless of how much treatment is required. In this arrangement, doctors form a group and sign a capitation contract whereby they take turns seeing a given patient. What are the implications of this change in compensation for moral hazards and for risk-bearing? On a capitated basis, doctors have little incentive to see the patient, which harms the patient and is an example of moral hazard. The doctor receives fixed compensation for each patient, no matter how many times she visits the patient. It leads to a much lower number of visits than the optimal level. The arrangement alleviates the moral hazard problem by taking turns seeing a given patient. It also shares medical risks among doctors because some patients may be more challenging to care for than others. Let's solve exercise 3.2. Padma has the rights to any treasure on the sunken ship, the Golden Calf. Aaron is a diver who specializes in marine salvage. If Padma is risk-averse and Aaron is risk-neutral, thus paying Aaron a fixed fee results in efficiency in risk-bearing and production. Does your answer turn on how predictable the value of the sunken treasure is? Would another compensation scheme be more efficient? Paying the agent a fixed fee results in inefficiency in production because the agent has no incentive to provide the optimal level of effort. He gets the fixed fee whether or not he recovers the treasure. He may shirk. It also leads to risk-bearing inefficiency because the risk-averse principal bears all risk, and the risk-neutral agent bears no risk. The inefficiency in both production and risk-bearing does not depend on the value of the treasure. Incentive-compatible contracts can be used to alleviate the moral hazard problem. One solution is that the agent pays a fixed fee to the principal and gets all the treasure found. This fixed fee rental contract can achieve efficiency in production and risk-bearing in this case. The agent has an incentive to provide an optimal level of effort because he earns the entire marginal revenue and bears the entire marginal cost. The less risk-averse party also bears all the risk. Another solution is a profit-sharing contract between them. The agent bears part of the marginal cost and earns proportional marginal revenue, leading to the optimal level of effort. It is production efficient. However, efficiency in risk-bearing cannot be achieved because the risk-averse party needs to bear some risk. Let's solve exercise 3.3. 14 states have laws that limit whether a franchisor can terminate a franchise agreement. Franchisees typically pay the franchisors a fixed fee or a share of revenues. What effects do such laws have on production efficiency and risk-bearing? It is a principal-agent relationship. The franchisees are the agents, and the franchisor is the principal. Let's consider the case where the agent pays the principal a fixed fee. It is a fixed-fee rental contract between them. The agent bears all marginal cost of production and earns all marginal revenue, leading to efficiency in production. The agent bears all risk. Next, we consider the revenue-sharing case. Because the agent bears all costs but earns part of the revenue, the agent will produce a lower quantity than the optimal level. It is not efficient in production. The principal and the agent share the risk. In the case of asymmetric information between the agent and the principal has to supervise the agent and terminate the contract when dishonest behavior is found. If the law limits the principal's ability to terminate the agreement, the agent has more incentive to cheat. The moral hazard problem becomes more serious. On the other hand, the fixed-fee rental contract is incentive-compatible without any moral hazard problem. The law does not affect it. Let's do exercise 3.4. If Louisa locks her bike carefully, the chance of theft is 5%. But this careful locking procedure is time-consuming. If she is less careful, the chance of theft is 20%. Louisa is risk-averse and is considering buying theft insurance for her bike. She can buy 2 types of insurance. With full insurance, Louisa pays the premium and gets the full $800 value of the bike if it is stolen. Alternatively, with partial insurance, Louisa receives only 75% of the bike's value, $600, if the bike is stolen. Which contract is more likely to induce moral hazard problems? To play even on consumers like Louisa, what price would the risk-neutral insurance company have to charge for full insurance. If we observe Louisa buying partial insurance, what can we say about the trade-off between moral hazard and efficient risk-bearing? Moral hazard is caused by asymmetric information. The informed individual harms the less informed party through hidden actions. The full insurance contract is more likely to induce moral hazard problems. With the full insurance, Louisa has an incentive to neglect her responsibility to take reasonable precautions and lock the bike carefully, which will increase the chance of theft. With partial insurance, she will lock her bike carefully because she bears partial loss if the bike is stolen. If the insurance company is risk neutral and offers fair insurance, its expected value of the contract is zero. Since under the full insurance, Louisa has a 20% chance of losing the bike. The insurance company's expected value will be as follows. It will pay back $5 for each dollar insurance Louisa purchases in case the bike is stolen. A risk-averse person will fully insure her bike under fair insurance so that her expected values will be the same in each possibility. Suppose she purchases X dollars of insurance. The left-hand side of the equation is her expected value if the bike is stolen. She purchases X but receives 5 times X. The right-hand side is her expected values if the bike is not stolen. She is equally well off in each possibility. So, she will purchase $160 insurance for her bike. The full insurance shifts all risk to the insurance company. If Louisa is risk-averse and the insurance company is risk-neutral, the arrangement is efficient in risk-bearing. If we observe Louisa buy partial insurance, it is inefficient in risk-bearing, but it alleviates the moral hazard problem. It is a trade-off between them. Let's go to exercise 3.5. Suppose now the publisher in exercise 2.7 faces a downward-sloping demand curve. The revenue is RQ, and the publisher's cost of printing and distributing the book is CQ. Compare the equilibria for the following compensation methods in which the author received the same total compensation from each method. A. The author is paid a lump sum. B. The author is paid a share of the revenue. C. The author receives a lump sum payment and a share of the revenue. Why do you think that authors are usually paid a share of the revenue? The publisher is the agent, and the author is the principal in the principal-agent relationship. We redraw the graph. The marginal revenue curves are downward sloping now. In the first case, where the principal receives a fixed lump sum payment, the agent bears the full cost and earns full revenue. The intersection of the marginal revenue and marginal cost curves determines the quantity of books sold, Q star. It is the optimal level that maximizes the joint profit. The joint profit is the sum of the areas A, B, and C. The fixed fee rental contract is incentive compatible. In the case where the principal receives a share of A of the revenue, the agent gets the rest of 1 minus A share of the revenue. The agent's marginal revenue equals 1 minus A times the total marginal revenue. The marginal cost curve is unchanged. The agent's marginal revenue and marginal cost curves determine the quantity of books sold, QA. It is lower than the optimal level. The joint profit is the sum of the areas A and B. It is smaller than the optimal profit in case A. The revenue sharing contract is not incentive compatible. In the third case, where the principal receives a lump sum payment and a share of the revenue, the quantity of books sold and the joint profit are between cases A and B. Paying a fixed payment to the principal maximizes the joint profit, but executing it has some difficulties. If it is hard to predict the revenue of selling the books, how much of the lump sum the agent should pay the principal is hard to decide. The principal may also conduct moral hazard. The author may not take the necessary actions to promote the sale, such as participating in the best-selling author book signing event. The arrangement of revenue sharing contracts can alleviate the moral hazard problem. That is why revenue sharing contracts are used in real life. It is a trade-off between moral hazard and production inefficiency. Let's solve exercise 3.6. A health insurance company tries to prevent the moral hazard of excessive dentist visits by limiting the number of compensated visits that a patient can make in a year. How does such a restriction affect moral hazard and risk-bearing? Shown in a graph. It is an example of a moral hazard if there is no restriction. Because the patients do not bear the cost of visits, they do not take necessary actions to care for their teeth and have an incentive to overuse dentist services. The graph shows the optimal number of visits Q star, which is determined by the intersection of the marginal benefit and the marginal cost curves. Without the restriction, the patient's marginal cost is 0. The marginal cost curve coincides with the horizontal axis. The equilibrium quantity of visits is QA, which is determined by the intersection of the horizontal marginal cost curve and the downward sloping marginal benefit curve. It is more than the optimal number Q star. The health insurance company can limit the number of compensated visits at Q star. The patient's marginal cost curve jumps at Q star with the restriction. It is 0 only for the part smaller than Q star visits, as the blue curve shows. The intersection of it and the marginal benefit curve determines the equilibrium quantity of Q star, which is the optimal number of visits. The restriction solves the moral hazard problem. The restriction shifts some risk to patients. It is a trade-off between efficiency in services and in risk-bearing. Let's go to exercise 4.1. Many law firms consist of partners who share profits. On being made a partner, a lawyer must post a bond, a large payment to the firm that will be forfeited on bad behavior. Why? The law firms require the lawyers to post a bond, which will be forfeited if the lawyer is discovered shirking. It is a method of reducing the moral hazard problem. The lawyers may shirk their jobs, and this hidden action may harm the law firm. The lawyers deposit funds to guarantee their good work behavior. Suppose an agent gets a benefit of G from shirking, and the probability of being caught is theta. Then the minimum bond that can discourage shirking is B equals G divided by theta. A higher benefit from shirking will lead to a higher bond. A lower probability of being caught will also result in a higher bond needed to prevent shirking. Let's address exercise 4.2. In soft problem 19.5, a firm calculates the optimal level of monitoring to prevent stealing. If G equals $500 and theta equals 20%, what is the minimum bond that deters stealing? Workers post bonds of B that will be forfeited if they are caught stealing. Suppose the benefit from stealing is G and the probability of being caught is theta. The expected loss of stealing is theta times the bond B. The minimum bond satisfies the equation in which the expected loss equals the benefit from stealing. The minimum bond will be $2,500. Let's answer exercise 4.3. In exercise 4.2, suppose that for each extra $1,000 of bonding the firm requires a worker to post, the firm must pay the worker $10 more per period to get the workers to work for the firm. What is the minimum bond that deters stealing? The benefit from stealing is unchanged under the new arrangement, but the expected loss of stealing increases. The expected loss has two parts now. One is the forfeited bond, and the other is the foregone payment equal to 1% of the bond. The minimum bond satisfies the expected loss equals the benefit from stealing. The minimum bond will be $2,475. Let's address exercise 4.4. Starting in 2008, Medicare would not cover the cost of a surgeon leaving an instrument in a patient, giving a patient transfusions of the wrong blood type, certain type of hospital-acquired infections, or other preventable mistakes. Hospitals will have to cover these costs and cannot bill the patient. These changes are designed to provide hospitals with a stronger incentive to prevent those mistakes, particularly infections. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 2 million patients are annually infected in hospitals, costing society more than $27 billion. Nearly 100,000 of those infections are fatal. Many of these infections are preventable if hospitals more rigorously follow basic infection control procedures, including having doctors and nurses wash their hands between every patient treatment. Is Medicare's policy designed to deal with adverse selection or moral hazard? Is it likely to help? Explain. The policy is designed to deal with moral hazard. Hospitals bear no cost for mistakes before the policy, and they have an incentive not to follow necessary infection control procedures. These are hidden actions, and Medicare officials are difficult to monitor. It leads to more mistakes than the optimal level and harms society. The policy will likely solve the moral hazard problem because the cost of mistakes is shifted to hospitals, and hospital doctors consider marginal costs and marginal revenue when making their decisions. The number of medical mistakes will fall as a result. Let's solve exercise 4.5. Used cars receive lower prices if they were rental cars than if they were owned by individuals. Does this price difference reflect adverse selection or moral hazard? The price difference reflects a moral hazard problem. The rental car drivers will not take care of the cars as carefully as the drivers who own the cars. Due to asymmetric information, the rental car companies are hard to monitor the drivers' hidden actions that damage the cars. As a result, the value of rental cars will be lower than that of individuals. Let's solve exercise 4.6. Many substandard condo developments have been built by small corporations that declare bankruptcy or go out of business when legal actions are started against them by condo buyers. What legal remedies might reduce this moral hazard problem? If you are considering buying a condo in a new building, what characteristics of the builder would make you more likely to buy? Explain. Builders with good reputations and large assets are less likely to have moral hazard problems than small firms. Large firms can afford the loss in lawsuits and stay in business. To reduce the small firms' moral hazard problems, they should be required to place a deposit in the government in case they face legal actions. Let's answer exercise 4.7. In 2018, Amazon received a pair of patents for a wristband that can locate warehouse employees and track their hand movements in real time, and an inventory management system using trackers and receivers to monitor workers' movements and breaks. Can Amazon use these innovations to address moral hazard problems? How do they help? These innovations can reduce the moral hazard problems caused by asymmetric information. Employees may shirk in their jobs. The devices are methods of monitoring employees and preventing shirk. However, the devices may not detect some information, such as employees' degree of effort and attention when working. Let's go to exercise 5.1. List some necessary conditions for a firm to be able to sort potential employees by providing them with a choice of contracts. Suppose there are two types of workers, the hardworking and the lazy. The firm provides a choice of two contracts, a contingent contract and a fixed fee contract. The contingent contract offers no salary but a share of sales. The fixed fee contract offers a fixed salary regardless of sales. The firm can design specific salary and share numbers so that an industrious worker will choose the contingent contract and a lazy worker will choose the fixed fee contract to maximize their income. The potential workers' choices reveal their types. The firm will hire the workers who choose the contingent contract. The condition for designing such contracts are that the workers know how much they can sell and the firm knows how much each type of worker can sell. Let's jump to exercise 6.1. In the application, layoffs versus pay cuts. The firm uses either pay cut or layoffs. Can you derive a superior approach that benefits both the firm and the workers? In the layoffs versus pay cuts application, the firm prefers the wage cut contract and the workers favor the layoff contract. Workers are less informed about the actual economic conditions the firm faces. The layoff contract provides the firm with an incentive to report the true economic conditions. A possible approach that benefits both the firm and the workers could be a profit-related wage scheme. The wage is a share of the firm's profit, which makes it unnecessary for the firm to claim whether the conditions are bad or good, but it requires the firm to reveal its profit honestly. Let's address exercise 7.1. In the challenge solution, show that shareholders' expected earnings are higher with the new compensation scheme than with the original one. We examine the case of Jim in challenge solution. The original compensation scheme is based on 1 year's performance. The new compensation scheme is based on a 2-year period. Under the original arrangement, Jim makes loans to both groups of customers. Group 1 produces revenue of $10 million. Jim receives 10%, $1 million, and the shareholders have $9 million. Group 2 is much more likely to default. It produced $30 million this year, but its default in the second year cost the firm $40 million. Jim gets $3 million as a bonus, but the firm suffers $30 million over the 2 years. Jim will get $4 million by loaning to both groups. The firm's shareholders' expected earnings in the 2-year period will be minus $4 million. The firm suffers a loss under the original compensation scheme. Under the new arrangement, Jim's bonus is based on a 2-year period. He will not provide loans to the second group. He gets $1 million by loaning the less risky group. The firm's shareholders get a profit of $9 million under the new compensation scheme. Let's solve exercise 7.2. Adrian, a manager of a large firm, must decide whether to launch a new product or make a minor change to an existing product. The new product has a 30% chance of being a big success and generating profits of $20 million, a 40% chance of being fairly successful and generating profits of $5 million, and a 30% chance of being a costly failure and losing $10 million. Making minor changes in the old product would generate profits of $10 million for sure. Adrian's contract gives her a bonus of 10% of any profits above $8 million arising from this decision. If Adrian is risk neutral and cares only about her own income, what is her decision? Should shareholders be happy with this compensation contract? Describe a contract that would be better for both Adrian and the shareholders. If Adrian decides to launch a new product, her expected income will be $0.36 million. If she chooses to make a minor change to an existing product, her expected income will be $0.2 million. She is better off launching a new product. The shareholders have an expected profit of $4.64 million if a new product is launched. But $9.8 million if the existing product is modified. The shareholders prefer making minor changes to the existing product. The manager's choice will not be in the firm's best interest, making the shareholders unhappy with the compensation contract. A profit-sharing contract is incentive compatible and can be used to maximize the joint profit. For example, the manager gets 10% of the firm's profit. Adrian earns $0.5 million if she launches a new product. She earns $1 million if she makes a minor change to an existing product. She will choose the latter. Her choice also maximizes the principal's expected profit. The shareholders get $9 million instead of $4.5 million. The agent's choice is in the principal's best interest. Let's answer exercise 7.3. The manager considers carrying either cameras from Nikon Americas that come with US warranty or gray market Nikon cameras from a European supplier, which are the same cameras but their warranties are only good in Europe. The gray market cameras have a lower wholesale price. The manager earns 10% of the store's profit. If the store loses money, he lives with nothing. He believes that if he sells the Nikon Americas cameras, the store's profit will be $400,000. If he sells the gray market camera, he believes that he has a 50% chance that the store's profit will be $1 million and a 50% probability that the store will lose $300,000. The manager and the store's owner are both risk neutral. Which camera does the manager choose to sell? What choice would the owner prefer? Construct an alternative compensation plan involving a salary such that the manager will earn as much from selling Nikon America cameras and that will dissuade him from selling gray market cameras. If doing so, lowers the owner's expected earnings. The manager's expected income is $40,000 if she sells Nikon America cameras. His expected income is $50,000 if he sells gray market Nikon cameras. He will choose to sell gray market cameras. The owner of the store earns $360,000 selling Nikon America's cameras, but $300,000 selling gray market Nikon cameras. The store owner prefers selling Nikon America's cameras. The manager's compensation scheme is not incentive compatible. The agent's choice is not in the principal's best interest. A fixed-fee rental contract can solve the moral hazard problem. After paying the store's owner $360,000, the manager bears all costs and earns all revenue from the sales. The agent's expected profit will be $40,000 if he sells Nikon America's cameras. His expected profit will be minus $10,000 if he sells gray market Nikon cameras. He will choose to sell Nikon America's cameras. Another incentive-compatible compensation plan would be a fixed salary plus a long-term bonus based on his performance over a long time. Let's tackle the last question, exercise 7.4. Many firms pay bonuses or make contributions to an employee's pension fund on an annual basis, but require a vesting period, often 8 to 10 years, during which the employee must stay with the company to obtain ownership of these assets. An employee who leaves the company before the vesting period loses any claim to the assets. How does vesting reduce moral hazard in employment relationships? The moral hazard problem occurs when the employees harm the firm through hidden actions, such as shirking in their jobs, leaving the firm after training, or engaging in reckless and irresponsible behavior. The pension plan reduces moral hazard because employees maximize their benefits by maximizing the firm's profit in the long run. Employees' actions will be in the firm's best interest. Thank you so much for watching this video, and congratulations! You have completed the course and solved all the exercises in the textbook. Keep up the good work in your future study. Good luck. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.